Microphone, sorry.
I'll ask Mario.
Mario?
And Giulia. So, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and welcome to this round table. My name is Maurizio Bettiga. I have the honor of chairing this session, and I'm here today with the affiliation of the Lombardy Green Chemistry Association and my company in Milan, Ital Biotech Limited. And the session of today is called Nothing Less Than Plastic Decarbonization. And I'm very happy that I have here on stage someone that could have a lively and interesting discussion and interesting contributions on the concept of plastic decarbonization. So we will all hear the contributions of the panelists, and in a very, very short while they will introduce themselves with our tour de table presentations. But I will start already saying that after the contributions of the panelists, and in case you feel it's necessary, of course, questions and remarks from the audience are also welcome, and I will try to moderate those too. So starting from my right, I would like to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, so I will avoid embarrassing mistakes in affiliations and pronunciation of names. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mauricio, and for inviting me to join this very interesting panel. I'm Ludo Dils. I'm professor at the Antwerp University in Belgium. I'm also the senior advisor for sustainable chemistry at Vito, but my main task at the moment is to be the chair of the advisory and programming group of the public-private partnership. We already heard this morning about another public-private partnership, CBE, and in my case it is Aspire, which is leading now the program Processes for Planet, and this is a partnership with all the different process industry sectors in Europe to bring them towards circularity and climate neutrality.
So, Maria Giovanna Vetere, I'm Director for Public Affairs for NatureWorks. NatureWorks is a biopolymer producer. We produce PLA, and yeah, we are a global producer. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon from my side as well. Good afternoon from my side as well. My name is Hasso von Pogrel. I am the Managing Director of European Bioplastics. European Bioplastics is a European association representing the industry active in the field of bioplastics in Europe. It's currently roughly 70 member companies internationally active in the production, in the production, how do you call that when you make plastic bags? Conversion, thank you, yes, conversion and selling of bioplastics, but also other members around the area like brand owners and universities are also members of our company, of our association. And the main goal of our association is to lobby for favorable infrastructure, legal infrastructure in Brussels. But I think we'll get into that more closely during the round of discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I think most of you have been in the audience also this morning and have heard the Avancium presentation on PEF. So in addition to using biomass, Avancium also is actively pursuing the conversion of CO2 via electrochemistry in building blocks like glycolic acid, what you can also make for plastics. So actually I can address it both from a biomass as well as a CO2 point of view.
Thanks for your introductions. And now I will start with a question collectively for all the panelists, and I will welcome whomever of them wants to pitch on this. So just to start from ground zero, I'm going to ask you, is there such a thing as plastic decarbonization? How do you intend it? Hasso, first, please.
In principle, I would say no, because decarbonization is something you can do in the energy sector. You can replace fossil carbon in the energy sector by using hydro energy, solar energy, wind energy. That's where you can really get away from the use of fossil carbon. In the plastics industry, however, you will still be using carbon, so what you're actually doing is, and I would like for you to take that home as something, you are defossilizing the industry and not decarbonizing it.
Ludo?
I wanted, of course, to say the same, but I would like to add to what Asso is saying that indeed, if you go away from fossil carbon, we only have 3 other sources that we can use. The first one is CO2 that we can take. It's coming from the atmosphere. The second one is carbon from the biomass. It's coming from the biosphere. And the third one is carbon that we obtain via recycling via the technosphere. And these are the 3 carbons that we can use in a more sustainable way, and so we can better speak about sustainable plastic use or something like that than decarbonize them, but certainly moving away from fossil origin.
Yeah, clearly same. I mean, we need to move away from fossil-based carbon, but not from carbon per se, that's clear. And incentivizing and increasing the use of bio-based carbon is at the end also from recycling. So all those forms which keep the CO2 out from the atmosphere. So the idea is not increase climate change. So not increase what the phenomenon that we see already today of climate change, which is provoked by the emissions in the atmosphere. So for clearly the decarbonization in the sense of getting away from fossil-based plastics is one of the ways to get there.
Yeah, not too much to add. I mean, the only thing is, I mean, I like to give an anecdote. We were preparing in the Netherlands a big, say, subsidy project, and actually we had some critical friends from outside who would actually give input to the proposal, and so and it was also really around bio-based plastics, and the question was actually from, do we need carbon in plastics? So I mean, maybe for us it is very logic that materials really are for a major part consisting of carbon, but certainly at other levels it is not always that clear. So I think we should really also advocate the message that to keep society as we have it now with all of our materials and products, that we really have to make the carbon circular, and in that respect I think we still have some communication efforts to do here.
Okay, thanks for your contribution. So, well, I would like to expand the discussion here on then, we understood that there is no bad carbon. There is a carbon that comes from the wrong place. But how about where the place where the carbon is going? What I mean, can you elaborate on, for example, recyclability and end of life of bio-based plastics? Are there bio-based plastics whose only fate is incineration? Are there? It's a question. Or can you elaborate on this concept? And how does this carbon contribute, in your opinion? Still biogenic carbon, this is the usual debate.
Yeah, maybe I can start. Yeah, bio-based plastics, if we go, and especially on those used in packaging, for instance, but also durable goods, wherever you have recycling, the benefit that you have is that you keep the carbon in the loop. So there is no double, triple emissions. Still, talking about carbon neutrality, it's a bit not correct because you still need energy to produce, so you still use some carbon. But at least that carbon that was captured from the atmosphere and kept into the bioplastic will stay in the bioplastic with recycling. So in the case of composting, because some, which is technically also called organic recycling, because it is a form of recycling, the benefit is still the ability of improve the soil fertility, so capture the carbon from the atmosphere, using in a product which is compostable, and then going back to the soil, and the soil which will increase fertility will be able to do again as a big carbon capture and carbon sink. So whatever is the end of life of the different bioplastics, whether are bio-based or compostable, for sure the net benefit on the CO2 emissions is evident.
If I can add, I think this organic recycling is very interesting because it keeps the system neutral. It's carbon neutral. Whatever you do, at the end, it's neutral. And so in a lot of applications, especially when we are dealing with food and with food that will stick to the packaging, etc., this really makes sense to do it in that way. If we do it in that way, I would personally like to break a lens to transform it then not into CO2 via classical composting, but to transform it into biogas via anaerobic digestion so that we can still make use of it in a better way. And especially nowadays, I think this is very interesting to make biomethane. On the other hand, in a lot of other applications, especially in all those plastics that do have a higher performance, that do have a higher functionality, there that we really use in long-lasting materials, etc., there we have to go to recycling processes. And so I think it's important that from now on we start to speak more about recycling of bioplastics and not only bring bioplastics in the light of biodegradability, which is sometimes a little bit of perception. Having said that, if we go to recycling, we must also understand that this is not perfect, like you mentioned. It's in the best case, we still have to add 20% of virgin material, and in the normal case, it is 30 to 40% of new material that we have to bring in. But if we use these renewable carbons, then the 30–40% that is waste, because it cannot be recycled at the end, because it's residue, it's too difficult, too dirty, whatever. That's something that we can still use in energy, in a sustainable energy form. So again, if we do that, we have 60% that stays in the circle, which is a carbon sink, and the 40% that is at the end used as energy is still carbon neutral, which is completely different from fossil because it's always carbon positive. It's always emit extra points.
Can I make one comment? Of course, if you look at recycling, of course, there are very many different ways. Yes, I mean, I already put something on the table around polyesters, etc., that they are very well recyclable. Polyolefins is much more a challenge. I think if you look at the bioeconomy, we certainly face the risk that you now see that certainly in Europe. There is a strong push from the traditional petrochemical plastic industry to focus on gasification or pyrolysis as a feedstock for their inlets. That is, of course, a route, but if that really, I mean, one of the things is really the total yields which are achievable there, and I think Ludo might even be a little bit optimistic if you look at those kind of routes. And the other thing is really that it shouldn't really take away the focus of establishing routes for both CO2 and biomass to be established, because I mean it can never really be sustainable to only use recycling as your source for renewable carbon. So I do see some certainly on the higher policy level some strong pushes to really invest a lot in the say recycling of polyolefins back to polyolefins. What, in my respect is maybe the development of the other technologies putting on a low priority.
Okay. Happy? If you want. Yeah, maybe one short addition. So coming back to your original question, whether bio-based carbon is recyclable, yes, it's of course just as recyclable as fossil-based carbon. It's always in what kind of polymer is it ending up, or in what kind of application, and that has the implication of whether it's recyclable or not. But I think we need to be clear that bioplastics or bio-based plastics are just as recyclable as any conventional plastics. In many cases, you have so-called drop-ins, so bio-based versions of already existing fossil-based plastics, bio-based polyethylene, bio-based polypropylene, PET, new, and then you have additional and new polymers like PLA or PEF, for example. All of them are perfectly recyclable. So I think this is a discussion I would like to have people understand, that a bioplastic or a bio-based plastic is no different than from a conventional plastics, except for the benefit of being bio-based, and therefore on an LCA level, on a much higher level.
Okay, thank you again. And I think I like that we had these initial contributions and discussion, because we created a starting foundation for us and the audience to hear then what the different institutions and companies and research areas are doing towards what they consider to be, from today on, we say defossilization of bio-based and bioplastics. So I think we can go in order, so we take one microphone at a time. So starting from my right, if you can just explain what your institution and in particular is doing towards that direction, besides what everyone knows.
Thanks, Mauricio. So at Vito in Belgium, we are working very strongly on all kinds of sustainable processes on one hand, and this is something we do by the integration of conversion processes, be it bio or chemical or electrochemical or whatever, together with downstream processing. But this is not the topic of today, so I will not elaborate on that. And the second one is to look to the feedstock. The feedstock is CO2, plastic for recycling, or a biomass. And I would like to focus today on biomass, as this is most important here. And there we came to the conclusion about 10 years ago that at the level of chemicals, there was not that much of bio-based aromatics available. So therefore it was decided to set up a shared research center between the Netherlands and between Belgium to work on bio-based aromatics. Because a lot of other chemicals, bio-based, do exist, but there was a little bit of a lack. We heard this morning in the discussion of Neste that aromatics are also important for the SAFs, etc. So it's quite important to have them as well. On top, we know that 40% of all the chemicals are aromatic. So in that way, we are working together in a three-line development. One is on thermochemical processes to deliver BTEX, just the basis, as Ed was mentioning a little bit for the chemical industry. The second one is a furan chemistry, but Ed will be better placed to speak about furans and so on. But so this is furans that's coming from C5 sugars. And then the third one, which is the most abundant aromatic source in nature, is lignin, and there we try to develop lignin towards all kinds of applications. And maybe some people are still with the way of thinking that you can make everything from lignin except money. Well, this is drastically changing these days. There was already a mentioning about the millions that are made with lignin selling this morning, but also now we see that all kinds of applications are coming up. If you depolymerize the lignin to make it more soluble, more reactive, more homogeneous, etc. So in that way, this is one of our very famous development lines, and I'm proud to announce, we discussed a lot about pilots. Next week on Thursday, so just in 1 week from today, we open our Ligno-Value pilot plant, which is depolymerizing 250 kilograms of lignin per day. I will stop here and can add later on.
Okay, so we produce bio-based plastics since many years now. NatureWorks started to work on PLA really to find a way to use better corn, so an abundant biomass in US in this case, because the company is based in US. So for me, what is important when you work with the bio-based plastics to really add value on what you do is from work on both sides. So from one side, taking care of the feedstock, so making the most sustainable possible from the feedstock side, so using sustainable sourced biomass, whatever is the biomass, primary sourcing, secondary sourcing, waste. I mean, always make sure that the biomass that is used is sustainably grown. The other, which is not always immediate, especially when you go on secondary feedstock, so it's not always good to use secondary feedstock. I mean, it's not per se sustainable. It's something that still needs to be proven. On the other hand is the end of life. And in our case, we are really supporting all the different, because PLA is recyclable, is compostable, is chemically recyclable. So as far as possible to keep the recycling option close to the application. So every item has a different recycling option. So we should try to design our systems to collection, sorting, and recycling, really thinking of the application. So there are some applications which are more efficiently mechanically recycled, some others which are probably more efficiently chemically recycled. Others can bring way more benefit with composting, like you explained beautifully before. So I think what we probably miss is the way to make all this system work better together, because the industry is still too small, generally, so at world level, but also at European level. And clearly we need more involvement from the policymakers, more in trying to understand what we do and help us also to do better what we do already.
Well, when I introduced myself or our association, I said that one of our major deals is to lobby for a favorable environment in Brussels, and this is the bio-based concept is one of the main issues that we're dealing with. Some of you may know that today around 50% of plastics is being used in packaging, and the European Commission has brought out the Packaging Waste Directive. It is currently being revised, and it says that by 2030, all packaging, plastic packaging, must be either be reusable or recyclable. Unfortunately, when they talk about recyclable, they normally mean only mechanical recyclable, are not taking the other recycling options into consideration. But, and this, to my mind, very narrow focus is overlooking a lot of issues. For one, already today, a lot of plastics are technically recyclable. The reason why they're not being recycled is because it's just not economically viable. So unless you find a way of doing so, and this is something the Commission actually wants to do, but personally I don't know exactly how they're going to get there, it's going to be very difficult to really focus only on that. So, in addition, the European Commission wants to introduce a minimum recycled content in packaging, which per se is fine, but for many reasons it cannot be the only solution. For one, when it comes to food contact material, recycled content currently except for PET, to my knowledge, is not workable. I know they're working on different regulations to open the market also, but at this current stage, it's not possible. Then we already discussed the fact that once you recycle a polymer, the chains become shorter, so you will not be able to recycle something indefinitely. You will always have to introduce new carbon, new polymers into your plastic. And with bio-based polymers, you can kill two birds with one stone. You can make a plastic not only food contact approved, but you can also have something similar to a recycled content by having a bio-based content. So one of our major aims regarding the issue of bio-based plastics is to have a level playing field, that bio-based plastics should be counted towards recycled plastics on a at least very similar level.
Yeah, a couple of remarks from Evansim's side. I think if we are starting new research lines, I mean, quite often we look at four characteristics. I mean, quite quickly, is it technically bringing something extra in respect to the incumbent materials? Two, do we see a road to make it economically feasible? Three, is it recyclable? And four, what happens with the material if it ends up in nature either way? Because, I mean, I think, for example, take clothing, yes? I mean, you always have abrasion, so you will always have part of your fibers which you wear will end up in nature. So for some aspect, it's always interesting to look, or necessary to look at what is the end of life of the materials. And then, in addition, I mean, we also look at then what are the building blocks of the plastics we use. Because, I mean, if you have degradation, then in general you get the monomers coming free again in the environment. So are they benign, or can you expect that they will degrade quickly in the environment or not? So, and yeah, we do that together with a lot of other partners, with, for example, parallel screening, etc., to quickly assess if those materials are biodegradable and what happens. So basically to really be, for us to pursue a certain line, all the four elements, so technical properties, economy, recyclability and biodegradability should have ticked the boxes.
Okay, this was very interesting. Thank you all for your contribution. Do we have any question or contribution from the audience? Do we have a microphone that we can send down? C'è un microfono che possiamo dare al pubblico? Grazie. Thanks. So,
hello. Hello. My name is Vander Tumiati. Just a number. In the municipal waste sector, we have statistics at the European level that each person produces about 480 kilo a year. Then 79 kilo of organic waste. Then, in this case, more or less, obviously, 10–12% of this fraction are based with the plastics, bioplastic and others. Question. What is the best solution in this way? Because through the anaerobic conversion, you produce biogas, but you are not able to degrade this. It's a big problem. Question, in terms of mass balance, energy balance, value, economic value, what is the best? I think, personally, that the best is conversion directly, these materials, directly in energy content or biohydrogen. In less than 10 minutes, you have a very efficient way without any other problems. Without produce biogas, because we have a conflict. Without produce gasifications or others. more or less 10% of this content, we are able to convert this in biohydrogen. Good question. Do you consider this as an option for the future? Thank you.
Is there anybody who wants to reply?
I can start, and
yes,
I look
please.
forward to the others. I think indeed municipal solid waste is a mixture of a lot of things, and once you start with a mixture, it creates certain problems, and every mixture that you use drives you from the beginning in the direction of energy applications due to the fact that you use the mixture. So you have to think about, must I start from the mixture or not? That's the first point. But of course, it's a given at the moment, and then it creates a lot of problems. That's the first point. Second, if you mix organic kitchen waste together with packaging waste, etc., for me, that's mixing wet material with dry material, and you are making a big mess of everything, because the wet material is not so interesting for incineration. It is a loss, and it's nice for, sorry to say it, for biogas production, whereas the dry material is very interesting either, and you can choose, you can go for energy applications, but you can also gasify, and then you use it again as a feedstock for the chemistry. That's a possibility. If you do the fractionation a little bit more, then you can go to chemical recycling, or in some cases mechanical recycling. We did not mention very much mechanical recycling, because mechanical recycling is always, Hasso mentioned it, by the European Commission. They like it very much, but they don't take into account that then always you are doing a downcycling on one hand, and on the other hand you are needing a lot of virgin material to reach the characteristics, etc., because you don't take into account all the different additives, etc. So this is a tension between different solutions, and it depends also on the logistics of your waste management system at the city or urban level, which approach is the best, I think.
Thanks, Ludo.
Yeah, maybe one small addition. I think, yeah, we should stop calling those streams waste, not only in language but also in legislation, because I mean that is really impairing recycling quite a bit. And the other thing is, I mean, we should really start evaluating the materials much better, so that there becomes an incentive to really separate as much as possible. And then for the final stream, I completely agree with you. But I mean, you should avoid that you create a system where everybody maximizes the stream to those kinds of solutions. And I think, yeah, there are a couple both on an economic, but also on a legislative area where we need improvements to redirect those streams.
Yeah, if I may add as well, I think the most important thing is indeed to create a separate waste collection. That's the first thing. And where I say you were absolutely right. If you mix things together, then your possibilities are narrowed down very much. I know, but there's a difference between the regulation and what's actually happening. I mean, if we look at the way it looks like today, in the member states of the European Union, we have a vast difference between the waste infrastructure in some countries and other countries, with some countries recycling very much and others incinerating or even landfilling up to more than 90%. So there's still a lot of work to do to get on a even similar basis. And maybe, if I may add, when it comes to packaging, it's often overlooked that the best end of life for packaging is not only dependent on the packaging itself, but actually on what it is packaging. Because recycling of a packaging which is contaminated with food waste is just not viable. It won't work. So in this case, composting or anaerobic digestion is the better option. Easy. He said in other cases, if you can separate the packaging from the content easily, then of course, if you designed it well, then mechanical recycling can be the best solution. So it's often, this is often forgotten that because people are saying, especially for composting, if you compost the packaging, it's like cold incineration. You're not even getting any energy out of it. Per se, that's true. But if you take into consideration that you may need the packaging or the bio-waste bag or the whatever it is that you collect the bio-waste in, then the story looks completely different. Because otherwise the bio-waste is not being recycled, it goes into the residual bin, is again incinerated or whatever. So it's always a little bit more complicated than people tend to think when they say, okay, recycling, in the case of mechanical recycling, is the only option. It isn't.
Thank you. There was another point from the audience there. We already have the microphone.
Yes, thank you for an interesting discussion. Marco Alvisi from CETMA. We are a research center, a private RTO, no-profit, located in Brindisi, and we support small and medium enterprises in develop innovation in his processes, especially in polymer sector, to help small and medium enterprises in develop sustainable processes with substitution of fossil plastics with non-fossil plastics, and also to recycle and in the production reject or end of life the fossil plastics. So I have remarks and a question, maybe not off topic, I don't know. But the remarks is we, from our observatory, also because we have advanced material department, but design department to diminish low the content of plastics in the packaging, for example. And we saw that a lot of small and medium enterprises need support for this transition. So you can use new plants, no? You can product new plants from corpse, from many organic elements to produce bioplastic, but there is a lot of small and medium enterprises that don't have the instruments to make this transition with economic and regulatory context, no? Compared with economic. So, in your advice, do you think this could be a problem to help all European small and medium enterprise sector to in the transition to sustainability, no? And not only in producing as Novamont or Aviatum new, of course, materials. And the question is regarding composite materials. We are expert in carbon fiber composite and glass fiber composite, and there is a big problem of recycling of composite material, in particular glass fiber composite coming from aeolic, for example, production, energy production. So what's your advice and suggestion? We are experts, so we know that there is no yet solution except from energy production that is not really decarbonization. Thank you.
Yes, Ludo?
Can I first react on your first comment about the SMEs? I'm involved in a lot of projects where we are trying to make a matchmaking between waste and feedstock. It means a lot of companies do create waste, and others need some feedstock, and then there are a lot of tools now existing in Europe where you can try to find a match between the two. And frankly, it fails most of the time, because the waste contains a wrong matrix, contaminants, and then they say, oh no, then I cannot use it, etc. So this is, it's nice tools, but there is no match. And so now we launch a call on what we call upcycling. So to make that waste becomes a match for as feedstock for another industry. And I think this intermediate action is a typical opportunity for SMEs in Europe, for innovative SMEs in Europe. Because the big companies will not start to do this upgrade, but they will be happy to receive the upcycled material. So that's an opportunity. I'm very happy that you launched the word on composites, because we are speaking all the time about plastics, and most of the time it's more composite material. Multi-layer is in fact also a kind of composite, etc. And so this is really a problem, and it goes in the direction then to force us to incineration or to things like gasification, etc. Let's say thermal processes, because that's the only way we can do it. So in that way, sustainable and safe design is becoming important. And so we have to take into account that we have to design our materials in the future in function of the quality that we need, of course, for the performance, but also in function of recycling. And in that way, I think a lot of progress can still be made. I think the bottle presented by Ed, which is just a two-layer with two completely different materials, is nice. It helps. If you have 5 layers, it's a nightmare. So these are a lot of things that are possible. And if I can add one last thing, at Vito we are working, I mentioned, with lignin, and we make lignin polymers based now on a furan on one end and a malic imide on the other end. And via, I'm sorry for the name, but it's the same name, via Diels-Alder reactions, but reversal Diels-Alder reaction, so the opposite of the Diels-Alder reaction, we can bring them together or separate them. And then you can go to designed reversal systems for depolymerization. And in that way, this, of course, can also be a future on the longer term. But that's really long term, because when we have that on the market, it's maybe, we still have to deal a lot with other waste as well. But it's future, and I think composites must be designed in function of circularity and not just in function of performance.
Yeah, just to complement what you already said, because I totally agree, design is going to be the key. But I also trust the recycling industry, meaning that we, in the past 20 years, we did many advancements in recycling many different streams. Like 20 years ago, PVC was not really recyclable. Today is normally recycled from the cables. So clearly, we have two things to put together. From one side, we have the substitution power, so trying to design things and get rid of those that we cannot do anything with it. So design it a better way, replace the materials that we cannot recycle with something recyclable. And when performance is, we cannot avoid to use that material, because there are situations, like you said, where we cannot avoid to use a specific material or a specific multi-layer of composite, then we need to find a way to recycle it or to make a specific use of it at the end of life. And I think technology is going to help on that. So I'm optimistic in general. So I try to view positive things. And by the way, the European funds are also investing in that. So wherever there is innovation, this is supported normally, and this is how we move forward. That's very clear. And the SME, well, they are in the same situation, basically. So from one side, they need to work more together. I think this, for Italians, somehow is a problem. If you look at how SMEs try to work together, this is not always easy. So sometimes what you cannot get with your own size, you can get working together in a consortium. So, and I think this is more or less what you try to do too, right? So this can be one of the ways to overcome the issue of the small and medium sizes that especially Italian companies have.
Thanks. Do you have anything to add? No, not necessarily.
No.
Okay, thanks for answering the audience. Thank you for your questions and your remarks. And I've heard many things now that prompt me to probably the final reflection of this round table, because I've heard that we would like to have a world where everybody wants waste, because it's so good that you can promptly convert it to profit or to a product. I have heard that we want to have new materials that are made from new feedstocks that are superior to the material that are existing, and they are designed so that they are recyclable and perfect. I have heard that we want to develop products that are maybe not competing on the play level field with the existing ones. So can we elaborate, can we reflect on that? On one side, we have the wish of decarbonizing, defossilizing. We have the expectation of doing it quick. On the other side, we have the expectation of being responsible and being perfect from the beginning. Does this make sense at all?
Shall I start? Thank you. I think this is a very good point. Innovation is normally also requiring perfection, which is something we struggle with, actually. And I can probably make the example of the electric cars, because I'm being myself an environmentalist, I try to make responsible choices, right? So when I was buying a car, I was trying to understand whether it was better to buy a normal engine car with oil propulsion or a new electric vehicle. And if you do some research, which I try to do normally, what you find is that every time you talk about electric vehicles, there is someone raising hands and say, oh, but what you do with the batteries? You cannot recycle batteries. And then you need to use rare earth, which is produced in countries where there are conflicts. And so all these hurdles that are at the end coming to the conclusion that the normal gasoline engines are better, maybe. So we just stay with what we have. So we keep the status quo, which we know already is not what we want and is not what is written in the legislation. And then if you go a little bit more into the detail, you find that batteries are recyclable, are not recycled yet today at the level that, I don't know, PET bottles are. But PET bottles here, they had 25 years to build the system. Batteries are now starting to build their own world, and they are doing it nicely. And we saw this morning a very nice presentation about the possibility to recycle the materials which are contained in the battery. So the progress is really moving fast. So what I see is that for the aim to perfection, we're just keeping the status quo. So this is something that we should keep into account. Maybe it's a bias, probably, and let's work on it somehow. Yeah, sure.
Thanks. That's very interesting, and I think indeed that there are a lot of possibilities to change, and we are speaking now about batteries in a certain way, etc. But please, this is a bio-conference. There are now developments of paper-based batteries already. So, and then and I think it is also, in the past we used cellulose as a fiber, and that was it. And now we are using cellulose in all kinds of fancy nano, micro structures, but also we can make it, we can charge it so that it becomes electric conducting, and etc. And if we can do this kind of things from biomass, then I think in some cases we can even replace some rare earths, etc., at the level of organic systems. There are also organic photovoltaic cells, etc. So there is a lot of possibilities over there to come to not a decarbonized world, but a more carbonized world by using carbon from nature or from atmosphere in a way that it replaces even inorganic functions like conductivity, electron transfer, etc. Biology is full of electron transport systems. That's biology. It's nothing doing else than just transporting electrons in a certain way. So it must be possible to do that as well in our material development.
So this would be extremely credible if you were a professor of inorganic chemistry instead of organic chemistry, but still I believe.
But I worked all my life on bacteria and heavy metals. So in that way I combined it always.
please.
Okay, if I may come back to your question where you said whether it's feasible or whether it makes sense to have everything done real quick, or whether these expectations are in any way doable. No, and picking up on what Maria Giovanna said as her last sentence, I think the quest for the perfect solution is the enemy of the better solution, and indeed it will cement the status quo. And this is the situation we're also already facing now, that a lot of improvement that bioplastics can offer today, while not being the perfect solution for everything, and that of course depends on how you define perfect. If you define perfect biodegradability, having a plastic application which does its job, but once you drop it on the floor, within half an hour it's completely biodegraded without any residue, then of course we will never get there. But already in the last 10, 20 years, there has been so much progress on the different kinds of bioplastics, be they biodegradable or be they only bio-based. We are going to get there if we get the chance. We need to have the environment to innovate, in some cases maybe even make mistakes, but if we don't do that, if we stay at the status quo, we definitely are worse off. And so anything that can drive innovation should be supported on a legislative level in the European Union, and at the end of the day, of course, worldwide.
Yeah, maybe a small addition from my side. I mean, I agree with the comment made earlier. I think level playing field is very important. I mean, for example, if you build a new plant and legislation demands that you go to, for example, zero waste, and that ask for much bigger investments than your incumbent fossil competitor has to do, then I think that legislation should mitigate those extra costs. I mean, I can understand the push to go there, but I mean, if you are really put that only on the new kid on the block to make those extra investments, I mean, it really slows down or even inhibits this kind of developments. So if you want to have more angles, be sure that the bankability of the thing still is possible, because else you are just delaying things, and I think that's a pity.
Maybe what was that? Because you really brought up a very important subject. If you want to support innovation, indeed, you need to provide incentives to do so. And currently, we're often facing exactly the opposite. We're facing hurdles instead of support, because we all know that if you are a young industry and if you're competing with a already long existing one like the fossil-based industry, you are always on the losing side when it comes to economics. So I agree completely with you. This is something that needs to be turned around. You need to incentivize innovation and not kill it.
Thanks for your remarks. We still have a couple of minutes for final remarks and conclusions. I can say that we have gone through the most levels of TRL, talking about research and industrial application, and also society and policy with representative of associations, and we talked about policies and incentives. So it is clear that there is a mobilization of all sectors of society and governments. Maybe in some there could be more. Maybe policies not reacting in the right direction, putting constraints and borders instead of opening alleys. It's all food for our thoughts. And I will leave the floor to the panelists to give their final remarks, if any, so that we can move on to the next part of the session.
I have one more to the collaboration between, say, academia and industry. I mean, I think, and that's a personal opinion, of course, but I mean, I think we can actually utilize the brains of academia better than we do at the moment. And the reason for that is that, of course, I mean, there are exceptions, but a lot of exceptions, but quite a few of the academia are really on a very small area where they want to make improvements, while quite often say looking at the whole value chain and really looking at where are the weak points, but also if those improvements actually also downstream have the same kind of effects, hampers then that those innovations can really be transformed into industrial applications. So I would really encourage also both from industry as well as from academia to a more intense kind of communication, so that really the areas they are working on are really also the areas which can be implemented by industry.
Thanks, Ed. This prompts me for the perfect conclusion, because I'm advocating IFIB organization for a specific session next year on how to improve collaboration between academia and industry in bio-based products. And I will be happy to chair that. And I mean, I trivialized it, because how the title of the session I mentioned, you know, it's 100, it will be the 100th time there is a session like that. But one could interpret that suggestion as by addressing specific points, which was raised. So this is a suggestion for next year. And I conclude by thanking our panelists for a very interesting and rich discussion. We managed to fill 1 hour with interesting concepts. Thanks to the audience. And we will need 5 minutes maybe to change speakers and prepare the next ones. And a big hand for the speakers. Thanks a lot. It was my pleasure. Lori, Beatrice, and Massimo. Yeah, you don't need to step forward. I just want to make sure that you are there, and I don't need to chase you downstairs. Okay, you're first. Very good. And I will.
Should I start, or do you want me to wait?
This was fast. Thanks, everyone, for being so ready. And so while the presentation is coming up on screen, it's my pleasure to start the new part of this session, which has 3 presentations from 3 invited speakers. And the first speaker is on stage, is Laurie Ray from Toulouse White Biotechnology from France. And we will hear about biomaterials, optimizing product development through public-private partnership, which is perfect, follow-up to what I just said.
Yeah, it's a perfect transition with what I will present today. Thank you very much. So I would like to thank Mario for this invitation and for giving me the opportunity to enter this new ecosystem. So before going deeply into the matter of my talk, I would like to give you a bit of context on industrial biotechnology. So we like, within TWB, to define industrial biotechnology as the use of microorganisms and their components to produce goods and services. And we have to keep in mind that industrial biotechnology are in our daily life since ages, but I would like to point out 3 main breakthroughs over the last century. So the first one is that we are able to produce at high scale with a robust production, for example, ethanol, giving the opportunity to address industrial matters. The second revolution is more on engineering tools like CRISPR, which allow new way of producing molecules. And the last one is the one we just discussed earlier. It's really how to go into circular economy and to switch from fossil carbon to renewable carbon. So we can wonder is it the right time for industrial biotechnology? And you will see in this slide that a lot of large corporations have defined very huge ambitions in terms of sustainability. So I just took some examples like Michelin, who want to disrupt innovation in biosource and recycled materials by achieving 100% sustainability by 2050. The two other examples are B2B examples where L'Oréal or Unilever want to achieve a percentage of biosourced product by 2030, which is quite near and with very huge ambition. And the last one I want to point out is more in the context of France Relance, which aims to bring back industry inside France. And this is an example where a startup, a French startup, which is based in the south of France, Metex, just acquire the Ajinomoto site, which was located in the north of France, and it's a huge production center of amino acids. So building on this trend, the French government launched what we called France 2030. So the aim is really to develop the activity of France, the economic activity of France, by granted 54 billion euros, 50% in order to decarbonate the industry, and 50% in order to support emerging innovation players. So within this context, there is 6 main acceleration strategy where industrial biotech can really impact. For example, the biosource products and industrial biotechnology, but also the recycling and incorporation of recycled materials or industry decarbonation. So today I just want to build on what has just been said. I mean, how can we foster the innovation to pre-industrial stage through public-private partnerships? And I would like to talk about TWB, which has been created 10 years ago in order to facilitate the interface between academics and industry, in order to de-risk and accelerate bioprocess and biocatalyst development from TRL 0 to TRL 6. And how we do that, we really build TWB on 2 main assets. So the first one is our ability to leverage a unique public-private ecosystem. So today we are more than 50 partners, both coming from industry players, venture capitals, academic research, tech transfer players, as well as institutions. We are on all the value chain and all the application fields of industrial biotechnology, like food, feed, chemistry, cosmetics, pharmaceutical, materials, but also energy. And what is important about this consortium is that all the members of TWB have signed a consortium agreement which rule out all the activities of TWB, and with one specificity which is linked to IP rules. And I will go back to that, but the main principle is that we want to foster and to accelerate the contractualization phase between academics and industry. So we have very simple IP rules. So the second asset of TWB is that we integrate a workflow in order to design, develop, test, and optimize catalyst and process. So we have 2 main platforms within TWB, one which is dedicated to strain engineering. So we are able to do all the steps from DNA assembly, DNA transformation, strain screening, creation of library at low and high throughput. And the second platform is dedicated to bioprocess and scale-up. So we are able to go from the scale of the milliliter to the scale of the 300 liters, both on the upstream process and downstream process. And we can do so optimization or scale-up. And we also rely on an ecosystem based mainly on Toulouse Biotech Institute, which is specialized in enzymatic and metabolic engineering, and also on the CRIT Bioindustry, which is specialized on the scale-up and the DSP. So in order to illustrate what we do within TWB, I will take 2 main examples. So the first one is how we use industrial biotech in order to develop alternative manufacturing. So we are part of a project which is called BioImpulse. So this project is led by Resicare, which is a subsidiary of Michelin. And the aim of this project is really to aiming bio-based chemistry in order to produce non-toxic adhesive resins. So within TWB, we have two main roles on this project. So the first one is that we gather under TWB 7 academic teams that will pull together in order to reach the specification of ResiCare. And we act as a project manager officer of this project. The second role of TWB on this project is really on the scientific part, so leading scientific tasks in order to build a new pathway to produce these resins by working on a new strain, working on a new process, and working on new sustainable feedstock. The second example is more on the concept of supporting circular approaches, and it's based on Carbios' story. So Carbios is a startup localized in the south of France. This startup is specialized in PET recycling. And within TWB and TBI, we've been involved in this project since the beginning in order to identify the enzymes, engineer the enzymes in order to improve their activities and their specificities, and in order to scale up the process for this enzyme. And that was the beginning of Carbios, and now Carbios is, let's say, SME is more than a startup. So why TWB allow to faster innovation? It's because we have an easy-to-work framework, and I would like to illustrate that through our three main activities. So the first activity is really to define, set up, and manage research and development projects. And we have, so we can do a B2B project with industry player, and we have set up really clear and really simple rules. So we leave all the IP to our members, and we do not ask for any royalties, but we ask for success fees, which are capped for our members, and these success fees are linked to the milestones of commercialization of our member. And we have a track record of more than 200 projects of this type. The second activity is that we provide all the means in order to foster, to speed up the development of the startups. So we have hosted 9 startups since 2015 within TWB. We will have 2 more before the end of the year. And the aim is really to provide them all the facilities, so labs, offices. They have access to our platforms, to our technological equipment, but also to a support in terms of administration, in terms of business, in terms of scientific matters. And the last aspect is that we are also able to integrate the offer of some startups into our own offer. So the aim is really to have framework agreements with these companies. So we have 4 framework agreements. One with a startup which is called Alta, developing natural strain evolution. Another one with IMIN, developing in silico modeling. Another one with Processium on technico-economic analysis, and the last one with Singulon, which is aiming to replace antibiotics by bacteriocins. And the aim is really to co-develop features, specific features together, and put that in TWB offer. So our ambition is really to go on with this growing R&D continuum. And TWB is part of a huge initiative in Europe, which aims to develop a research infrastructure that will fast-track the delivery of bioprocess to industry by harmonizing business practices and co-developing transnational research. So this project is based on 14 partners around Europe. Italy is part of this consortium, and as an example, we work with Rivo, an Italian startup working on the production of polymers in order to give them the opportunity to have access to our facility within this IBISBA project. And the last aspect I wanted to mention is that we want to go on with disrupting process development in terms of time and cost, and through 3 main ways. The first one is we want to offer impactful solutions to high-stake markets like agriculture, like care and nutrition, and like health. We want to go on with democratizing the access to industrial biotech by being part of key networks like IBISBA. And we want to go on with leading and contributing to ambitious research programs like BioImpulse. So thank you very much. And if you have any question, I can take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Laurie. We have time for one question from the audience, if there is. Otherwise, I suggest that you reach out to Laurie during coffee break or later parts of the day, and so we can move on to the next speaker and keep time. Thank you again. And it's my pleasure to invite on stage Beatrice Mongili from Biosphere, an Italian company. And Beatrice will tell us about applying leguminases to resolve end-of-life issues of thermoset composite plastics.
Okay. Hi to everybody. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Beatrice Mongili, an R&D project specialist at Biosphere. And today I present to you a project that has got different topic in common of what we have discussed this morning. I have taken some notes. Some of the keywords of this presentation. So I'll talk to you about recycling process. And I talk to you about airplane, but in this case, not about the fuels, but about the material that I use to produce airplane. And the project that I will present is financed by Bio-Based Industry Consortium. So they financed this idea, and today I'll present to you. So, okay. Before to start, I would like to introduce to you the company that I'm represented, so Biosphere. Biosphere is an Italian SME. We are located in the middle of Italy. We are near Bologna. And our main goal is the development of fermentation and downstream processes. So we are used to produce enzyme, biomass, or secondary metabolite. And to make a connection with this morning, enzymes are one of the main players in the conversion of biomasses. On the other side, we work a lot with a research, and we are investing in it in order to increase our capabilities and our competencies. And Bizente, this project, is one of these examples. So I want to start the presentation with this image, an airplane, because Bizente proposed a biotechnological way to pave the way to solve some issues that are linked with the material that we are using to produce airplane. Thermoset composite material. This material represents from the 50 to the 70% of the material that are used in the construction of this means and transport. So thermoset composite material are polymers, but after a process of heating, the number of double bonds increase, so this material is very rigid, and this is one of the reasons why it is very difficult to degrade them. But on the other side, you can combine this material with other material as carbon fibers, and in this way you can change the physical and mechanical properties. One of the main advantages of this material is that they are very light, and this is one of the reasons that force the use of this material in the aircraft sector. They are also used in other kinds of areas, for instance, in sports. And here in the photo you can see some pieces that are used in an airplane. On the base of the chemical structure, we can divide them as in polyester resin, epoxy-based resin, or vinyl ester resin. On the other side, there is a problem that is linked with the recycling. So from one side, they can be incinerated, but in the majority of the cases, airplanes are stored in landfills. So Bizente proposed a biotechnological way, an alternative way, to recycle this material. So here in the upper part of the slide, you can see the chemical structure of this resin. As you can see, the structure is very similar to other natural polymer, as lignin or cutin, that belongs to the plant's world, and also to polyethylene tetraphthalate, that is a synthetic polymers. But what we know is that there are enzymes that are able to degrade these molecules, even if these kind of polymers are very durable, and also thermoset composite material very durable. So the idea is, okay, there are these enzymes that are on the other side, the resin. Let's put together these two components in the reactor, and after the reaction, brings from one side the monomers in order to create a new material, and on the other side, the enzyme, and to start this process and this degradation again. So with this project, we, and as Biosphere and the consortium for sure, we would like to finish the project with the four main answers. The first one is that, are we able to create a new kind of enzyme? Are we able to evolve a new kind of enzyme that can degrade this kind of materials? On the other side, we are working on the material per se. So thermoset composite material, they are very durable. So can we substitute this material? Can we increase the biodegradable moieties in order to recycle this material and use in the transportation sector? And we would like to demonstrate that we can combine these two components and pilot scale and upscale the reaction. And on the other side, we would like to work also on the products. So we would like to create a fingerprint of toxicology for the molecules that are produced in the biodegradation. So these are the challenge that we have to take care of. And so the main objective, I don't want to repeat myself too much, but is to demonstrate that linear cellulose enzyme can work in this kind of recycling process. On the other side, we would like to scale up the process, but also about industries. We would like to connect different kind of companies. For instance, from one side, we would like to connect companies that works in the waste management with a biotechnological company. So these ideas liked a lot to bio-based consortium and also to European Union. And 2 years ago, this project was financed. The consortium is composed by 10 different partners that are spread all around Europe. And this project is coordinated by ATP. But what we are doing as Biosphere, we are a biotechnological company. We work in fermentation, and we used to work with the enzyme. So in Bizente project, our goal is to produce new kind of enzyme. The enzyme are designed by Evo Enzyme, that is a Spanish partner. And we have to produce this enzyme, but on the other side, to increase the production, to study how to increase the production of this kind of enzyme, to set up the enzymatic degradation reaction at lab level, and then scale up all the process. From the other side, we receive the material, so thermoset composite resin, that are chemically pretreated and mechanical pretreated in order to study the enzymatic degradation reaction. After all this process, we'll supply the product to University of Cadiz to allow the production of a toxicological analysis. And here there is just an example of what we have done in this last year. We have produced different kinds of hydrolases and peroxidases. we have studied how to increase the volumetric productivity. In this case, here you can see the results of cutinases that was produced in yeast. And in the study, we compare the volumetric productivity using two different kinds of carbon sources. After the process of enzyme production, we characterize the behavior of the enzyme, because in this kind of the reaction, it is very important to have a very stable enzyme that can work at high temperature. And in this month, we are working in enzymatic degradation reaction. So in the reality, this story has to be written, so I hope to present the results next year. And so I've finished. Thank you for your attention, and thanks also from Biosphere team. And I suggest to you to follow this project. We have a different social media platform. So if you have any question, I'm very happy to reply to you.
So we have time for a question. And I thought I had one. I didn't see, I mean, I didn't have time to see. Is there already, either prior or your research or as a result of your research, any kind of basal activity of any enzyme on these materials?
Do you want to know?
Because these materials are not normally those that one consider can degrade enzymatically.
Yeah.
So has ever been detected any kind of activity?
We are working on this part. And the proof of concept was demonstrated with the standard molecules. And now our challenge is to demonstrate if this is a feasible way to recycle this kind of material. So in this month we are making the reactions, and we are trying to characterize if there is a signal of degradation. For instance, now we are making analysis with HPLC. And so we are investigating in this part.
Okay, thanks. Thank you again. And we can welcome the last speaker on the stage. So, welcome to Massimo Nava from Aiming Italy. And Massimo will talk about, I would say, the topic of the day, which is energy shortage and incentives to overcome the actual crisis. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. See if I can manage to use this. Oops, one more. Thank you, and thanks for having me here and having Aiming together with you guys. I'm the managing director of our branch in Italy. Aiming is an international consulting firm that is specialized on helping startups and mature organizations on financing, I would say, their investment towards innovation, R&D, and sustainability. But before to start, I would just to say thank you guys again, especially to Mario Buonacorso that has been inviting us for the 5th year in a row. He's one of the, as you know, guys, the engine of this organization, and we are very proud to be with you guys. While we actually were planning this moment with you guys, we were thinking just to stay focused on what usually as a main highlights are the kind of measure and tools that your company might leverage on the market, again, for going in the direction of a more sustainable and innovative world. But the latest economic and geopolitical scenario has brought us to adjust a bit the focus of today, sharing our view or the view from the EU and Italian government about what they are putting together as tools to overcome the actual crisis linked to the energy shortage and the cost increase. So, Europe's dependence on energy imports has become a major source of criticism in 2022. But is this actually a cause of concern? I would say yes, it is. is because almost no one in the world is excluded at the moment from the negative impact of the recent and sudden increase of cost of energy, especially for natural gas and electricity. Energy for modern economy, such as European ones, represent the most important factor to determine the economic well-being and consequently the social well-being. So currently, it is estimated that the active of extraction, refining, distribution of energy directly amount to about 5% of the world GDP and is functional for the creation of the remaining 95%. Unfortunately, we are currently paying the price for a transition to not fossil energy sources that began too late, definitely, and grappling with the geographical events which we have no control over, at least in our room, I guess. So, since Europe is the most energy-dependent continent, the invasion of Ukraine has also forced the European Union and several member states to take action aimed to diversify supplies, encouraging alternative energy sources, and to increase final pricing. Among these countries, we can take Italy, obviously, as an example, because, for instance, just in 2021, 45% of its annual energy consumption came from the Russian natural gas. And to support companies in facing this huge increase of cost, with the beginning of 2022, the Italian government set at first a 10% tax credit addressed only to the gas high consumption companies. But of course, this incentive was not enough. So in the following months, the government put in place 4 tax credits with a higher percentage, extending the target to any kind of company. The last one was actually approved in the mid-September and is so-called aiuti ter with a 40% tax credit. And basically, so if you have a company in Italy at this stage, you should look into these measures and opportunities that are already available for, let's say, decreasing the cost of your energy consumption. So these are just a quick reaction to actual energy price increase. Accelerating a transition towards a clean energy is crucial to face actual and future energy crises. According to the Ember Global Electricity Review 2022, the global largest source of electricity is still with coal and fossil gas. However, when combined clean electricity sources, now we generate already the 36% of the world electricity, including hydro, including nuclear, wind, and power solar. So before starting with all the funds coming also from the Next Generation EU, I'd like to come back on a very important date, the 14th of July 2021, when the European Commission, with the promotion of the Green Deal, committed itself to decrease the gas emission of greenhouse gases as at least the 55% by the 2030 to transform Europe eventually in the first climate neutral continent by the 2050. So back to the Italian scenario. With the funds of the Italian Recovery and Resilience Plan, our government is focusing mainly on 4 main incentives that I'm going to try to present. The first one, the so-called M2C1 investment lines. This is an allocation of 1.5 billion dedicated to building new waste management plants and modernizing existing ones. Another 600 million go to the so-called Progetti Faro on the supply chain of paper and cardboard, plastic, and the waste from electrical and electronic equipment and textile. 60% of these funds go to the region in the center and in the south of Italy, as the beautiful Puglia that is hosting us today. Another major point is about what is called Accordi per l'Innovazione. This is an allocation of another €1 billion to carry out research on development projects to test and introduce innovative solutions. Also through collaboration with the Technology Transfer Center and research organization to implement new products, processes, and services, or improving the existing one. A first part of this fund was used in May 2022, and now results are expected together with the opening of the second tranche. The third measure is the one called Parco Agrisolare, 1.5 million dotation to reduce the high energy consumption of agri-food sector by redeveloping and producing facilities and installing photovoltaic panels. 30% of the budget was allocated for the first call opening just on the 27th of September 22, so just a few days ago. The last one on the board is about Green New Deal, another 750 million, to support sustainable innovation programs, including R&D activities, for decarbonize the economy, basically, to foster the circular economy with the reduction of the use of plastic and the replacement of plastic with alternative material, also for the urban regeneration and for a sustainable tourism. The opening date for application about this fund is with November the 17th this year. So from a European perspective, I would say in addition to the fund allocated for the Horizon Europe and the LIFE programs, we also need to mention the Breakthrough Energy European Fund, which is another 100 million euro pilot fund that invests in innovative and cutting-edge technology to decarbonize every economy sector. It will support Europe's best clean energy entrepreneurs whose solution can deliver significant and lasting reduction in greenhouse and gas emission. Funding for the Breakthrough Energy European will be included a 50 million contribution from the European Investment Bank that is granted by Innofin, a financial instrument founded through the EU Research and Innovation Programme, and another 50 million contribution from the Breakthrough Energy Ventures, that is an investor-led fund. So moving towards a conclusion of my boring speech, maybe. Today, the green transition is an obligation. The urge to develop and to put in place a strong and concrete strategy to move towards a clean source of energy, and this is a matter of fact. We can state that the European and Italian governments are open to help any kind of company towards the green transition with a huge injection of sources. But despite this positive landscape, companies still have to face some barriers, as, for example, the application of the incentive to specific realities, the complexity of the rules linked to the incentive scheme, and above all, I would say, a lack of skill to introduce those investments in our own company organization. And I would say here is where consulting firms like ours can do more to help companies on to get closer on finding this basically opportunity. And just to finish up, to give you something about us, as aiming every year, we work on an international innovation barometer that basically is a global survey that we run, let's say, together with 1,000 R&D directors out of 24 markets. And basically, according to their insights, we try to crystallize what is the ease and generosity of the main measures available in each country worldwide. And this is a document that we would like to share with you guys after the end of the forum. Hopefully, we'll give you some remark to take in mind. Thank you very much for your time and patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Massimo, for keeping perfect time to the second. Is there any question from the audience? So I have a question, and okay. Regarding access to incentives.
Okay.
And I reckon the answer is not very easy, but
give it a try.
In my experience and the sheer complexity of the procedure to access these incentives is very often discouraging. And of course, there are, companies that are there to help, and their help is very effective. But if you could remove one of these barriers, what would you do? If you could make it easy in one aspect, what would you do?
That's a $1 million question, I would say. In one word, of course, we can just encourage the governments, the Italian one in this case, but the European one, to decrease the level of bureaucracy, because most of the time, let's say, we lose opportunity because we are not aware or because we get trapped by administrative aspect. So that's why, for instance, for who does our job, let's say in our team, mainly we do have talents coming from a legal background, but also from a fiscal background. So not only, let's say, the technical one, very useful to help company to, let's say, go for the founding on innovation. So usually the rest of the team is obviously based on engineers. But again, in one word, to try to stay simple, less bureaucracy is not just a claim or, something for the advertisement, but I really hope that our governors, they will start to do it effectively, and this could really, let's say, empower all of us on moving towards a real innovation.
Thanks. Thank you for your contribution.
Grazie. Thank you.
And we have come to the end of this session, and the good news is that there is also coffee, and we will meet here again in 30 minutes, actually 25 minutes from now, at 4:30. Thanks everyone for your attention, thanks for the questions, see you next time.
500 organizations dealing with circular bioeconomy. Then we have Filippo Giancarlo Martinelli from Ireland. Actually, he's an Italian mate, and he's going to represent in the discussion the Irish Bioeconomy Foundation. Then we have George Sakellaris, which is a board member of the BioEast Bioeconomy Hub from the Czech Republic, which got an experience very interesting about foresight recently, so I think it would be nice to hear about this. And then we have, last but not least, of course, Manfred Kircher, which is today a freelance advisor, but he had a very long experience in circular bioeconomy. I had the pleasure to work with Manfred when I was preparing the strategic research agenda for the bio-based economy JTI. It was like 10 years ago at that time, and very active there. And he spent some times and years in industry and also in advising investors, as far as I understood, and launched a couple of clusters. So the idea for today would be to go through some questions and then to leave the floor open discussion, and I hope we are going to trigger some elements. So first of all, I would like to start from the first question, which is about the role of the regions in decarbonization, which is the topic for today. I think that regions plays definitely a key role in helping combining the global scale of the technology solution with the local economy, local specificities. We are talking today about systemic circular solutions quite a bit. And I think that there are key players in this regional ecosystem, which are the SMEs and their collaboration with research centers and all the stakeholders, as usually we know. We call them the 4 helix. I would like to start from Mr. Berlingerio, just to give an experience from the region, and I have to say that I have the pleasure also to have an office here with our company that needs to be boosted, so I'm very curious to listen about what Regione Apulia is doing in this perspective.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation, because I have to say that we are very happy to have co-organized this meeting together with Mr. Bonaccorso. And I think it's a very important occasion for our territory, because bioeconomy is one of the leading factors of our smart specialization strategy, both from the last period of programmation and for the current one. And the decarbonization is among the bio-life, one of the most important issues as well. And maybe I think it could be, if we could put my, okay, it could be useful to tell you a very short highlights on the region, which is counts almost 4 million inhabitants with almost 20,000 square kilometers and 900 kilometers of coastline, which is very important also for the other leading line of our strategy, which is blue economy, which is very much linked with many of the topics of this meeting and of the topics of decarbonization in general. We have tried in the last years, in the last, let's say, 15 years, to strengthen our excellencies on both in the scientific and academic sector, both in the industrial one, fostering the competition of our SMEs, but also of the large enterprises who are based in our territories, or multinational who have a plant or more than one in our region. And we did that with a strategy of a large scheme of grants, and but also with the strategy of special economic zones, We have two of them, one on the Adriatic Sea and the other one on the Ionian Sea, which includes tax relief, but also simplification of the procedure to localize a plant in the territory, and also incentives both for the enterprises and for workers. In the last programmation period, I think about 14-20, we had till now 6.5 billion euros investment enhanced by our grant schemes. And a very important part of this is based on industrial research, experimental development, but also on innovation at several levels. Of course, the decarbonization goes through lots of, let's say, lots of elements, not only in the industrial sector, or if we want, we can consider energy, the production of energy, one of our biggest industries, because it's not only, let's say, a transversal element, but also one industry, one of the most important ones, especially in this very hectic historical period. And Regione Puglia is among the Italian region, the #1 in the production of energy by solar power and also by wind, which is, as we were, let's say, discussing yesterday, which is a difficult balance between several public interests which are apparently in conflict one to the other one, because it's important to lower our carbon footprint in the production of energy. We also have in Puglia one of the biggest plants for the production of energy by carbon in Brindisi, actually. And also we have a giant of steel industry, which is now called Acciaierie d'Italia, but used to be called Ilva, which is one of the most energy-consuming, of course, plants in Puglia. It has almost the 20% of the overall need of power of Puglia. But it is also important to protect our landscapes and our the use of soil, for instance, for agriculture. So it is very difficult to, let's say, to match those different interests, and it's through technology and innovation, through science, through experimentation, that we aim to find the right ways to balance those different interests. I have to say that in the last 2 years, we also tried to add a new element, not only the research and experimentation on renewable energy plants, but also on the production of hydrogen. And again, we don't want to be the place where hydrogen is produced and stop. We want to try to build the entire chain of the hydrogen production, including, of course, the mechatronic part, so the construction of electrolyzer and of the storage equipment, because producing very much power from renewable energy, of course, we lose a very big part of the energy that we produce, because the net is not adequate to absorb it. And so we also need to foster the storage facilities. And hydrogen is one of the most important technology in doing that. So that's why in June this year, we signed a protocol with the national government and other 4 regions in Italy to foster the research part, but also the experimentation part of the hydrogen production, of the hydrogen use in industrial production, starting from Acciaierie d'Italia, which is now building a small new plant to experiment the use of hydrogen in the steel production. And last week we had a decree from the national government, the old one, I have to say, because we voted last weekend in Italy, to finance this experimentation significantly by the recovery plan from COVID. So we can easily see that there is, let's say, a link between a crisis moment and a new opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, and you were touching upon a number of topics that I had for my second question, but I can also comment on it because I think that there is a close relationship between biorefineries and circular bioeconomy and hydrogen valleys and hydrogen economy. From my point of view, the role of the region is key. And when I was starting 2 years ago, I started in STAM 2 years and a half ago. The first thing we applied for the IFIB project. We were too small. We were actually, at the end, entered in a project by a big player from Italy, and they've been signing the contract these days. And I think that this is key to combine the whole supply chain, as said, mechatronics and so on are key also to guarantee capacity. But what was also touched upon is, I think, how to be an attractive region and how to exploit the assets. So I think that Christophe has some concrete experience to tell us about this, especially if you tackle it from an SME, from a startup, if I did it right. So I would give you the floor.
Thank you, Stefano, for giving me the opportunity. Yes, as Stefano mentioned, I'm Director Europe at B4C, that's the French bioeconomy cluster. We consider us as the leading bioeconomy cluster in Europe, with a little bit touch of French arrogancy, of course, but at least we are the oldest. I mean, we are helping our members to develop innovation projects up to industrialization. And among our 500 members, we have 200 SME, and among them, more than 100 startups. And we have helped them to develop their process, technology, and business model. And 5 of them have reached successful first industrial unit in France. And 4 of them using BBI financing tool. I mean, we've won 4 BBI flagship in the last 3 years, all for startup. And among them, there is one special case. The project name is Resolute, and the startup is not French, it's from Australia, not Australia, Australia. They cross 15,000 kilometers to come into Europe. And we really help them to identify the right location to industrialize. It was Europe because of reach. I will explain you why, but everything was open. And so I clearly identify the success factor why we finally to invest into this spot and not another. First, a couple of words about the technology so you can understand. It's a small startup that developed a thermocatalytic process to convert cellulose, containing material, wood, waste, what you want, directly into high-value molecule, which after one step could become a solvent, which is bio-based, biodegradable, non-toxic, and much higher performance than the petrochemical equivalent. So the ideal case. So for that, I will tell you the results, the 4 success factors, and I will develop after, is biomass, logistic, innovation ecosystem, and money, by rank of order. The money come at the last. First, biomass. We needed a couple of dozens of kilotons of wood, dry wood, so it was pretty easy to identify, but it limited the choice of regions in Europe. Yes, around 100 kilometers. But what is important is real accessible biomass. Because it's not enough to have a list of potential biomass that could be used. If you want to be a bioregion, I mean, you have to map all the biomass you have in your regions, really accessible, with a competition of usage, with all the logistic, with the sustainable issue. I mean, for instance, several straw. You must include the soil health criteria. If your carbon content in the soil is decreasing, forget straw. In the next 30 years, you have to reincorporate 100% of wheat straw into the soil, and see later, things like that. So, and once you have done it, make it public so that a startup could take advantage and put you into the loop as a potential target region. 2 is logistic. A startup, its advantage and disadvantage, they have no asset. So they have, if you have a big company, you have already a couple of hundreds of millions of euros, if not billion, that to invested, and it's normal that you use it and you make an expansion of an existing facility. For a startup, you start from scratch. So a very competitive advantage is to identify already existing plant or platform with all the logistic and the utilities. And in our case, we identify the former oil refinery that we are converting into clean tech, biotech platform, and with all the utilities, it saves millions of euros of capex for a startup. So, if you want to be a bioregion, so map all your platform you have, or you will have in the future, and with a place, with the utilities, and the logistic and so on, and communicate on that. 3 is innovation ecosystem. And so in our case, yes, we identify several, we hesitate, but then comes to the real decision factor, innovation ecosystem. If you want to do some circular bioeconomy, something innovative, you don't have a product, and once the product is developed, you produce, you sell, and you stop every innovation. It's better that you keep on innovating, so you have an innovative ecosystem, so you can profit from the local situation. And here, you have to think long term. It was really the decision factor. Finally, they came in our region, but it was not mandatory, because for the last 15 years before, we have developed innovation ecosystem with academy, with startup, with SME, with large company, with farmer cooperative were involved from the beginning. And it was a very good decision factor to decide finally to go into this place and not the other. And last, and only last, is money. Sometimes it's missing a couple of millions of euros to make it happen. Even if you have a successful BBI project, you have the structural funds, or you have an industry investor, or you have capital risk investor. And here can have the roles of the region to either put a couple of million, small amount, in comparison with the huge investment, and help for the logistic if you have to improve the road and so on. But my 2 recommendations is, one, think long term, and do the 3 first steps before just offer money to the potential investor, because you will spoil your money. And if you don't have any bioeconomic cluster into your region, just associate with the local region. We have a bioeconomic cluster, like the region Normandy that knock our door, and now they finance us. Instead of starting from scratch a new bioeconomic cluster 15 years after the other, they just, it was neighbor regions, they joined the adventure, and we have a special attention, special focus for Normandy to create the innovation loop, and they can profit from our experience. So that it was, I promise it was short, sorry it was long, but that's a return of experience of how a bioregion could be successful on a short, long, and medium and long term.
Thanks a lot, Christophe. I think that you were mentioning a couple of points. I think that one of that was the think long term, and I think that this is a key point. And the other was to exchange best practice and exploit experience of successful cluster. And I think that this is where I think Mario is doing his best within Spring and experiences with the region. So I thank him for all the jobs. But I think it's time to move to George, because I think that he's working a lot on foresight, which is covering the long-term strategic dimension.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I have to introduce the region I represent. It's quite particular. It's the Bio-East region. This is a macro region. It's a big area of more than 100 million people. It contains 11 countries from Central and Eastern European part, and has been created in 2018 on a high level, on governmental level, so ministries are involved. And we have the full support of the European Commission. And structurally talking, there is a board, there is an advisory council with key experts from all over the world. And in practice, we have created, or we are creating, bioeconomy hubs in each country which make the real job. Actually, ministries, they never do the job. But we have to appoint somebody who will make it. And in this frame, the first approach was to teach, not to make people to understand, because I have to say that from decarbonization or zero pollution, etc., issues, we are far behind the European average. That's a fact. So the first approach, the first challenge was how to show to people how to implement the Green Deal. And that was a very difficult thing. So the first thing we did was to set up a foresight exercise, which by itself was very challenging. The foresight exercise started in 2020. It contained like 600 stakeholders were involved. They gave their opinion. More than 50 consensus conferences took place in local languages, and the 5 people who wrote the document, we never met in real. Everything was done online, and it was published last year, 300 pages document, presented officially by the Slovenian presidency, and it was quite successful. So in this document, which I will show you how to find it online, it's free of charge too, it's quite interesting results. We got 4 scenarios. One of the scenarios was what kind of actions we should consider in order to develop or to implement decarbonization principles in the macro region area. And very, very interesting answers came out of it. The first, I will briefly say, I will not go further in details, that the awareness level has to be increased. That was the first thing. The second was that we have to include the whole spectrum of stakeholders. We cannot just focus in one, otherwise it's nonsense. I mean, it has to be a co-creation event. That we have to involve the general public. And the last 2 very interesting things was that because of their political past, these countries, they are adapted themselves in top-down approaches. I mean, regulations coming from the government they have to implement. So the bottom-up approach was something new for them. So you have to enhance this possibility, and but also to try to develop a top-down approach in this direction, which requires the adoption of a bioeconomy strategy. And none of these countries has or yet a strategy, but they are starting discussions about it, and decarbonization is the key issue. And the last finding is that they have, for the stakeholders at least, but also for the public, to visualize an obvious benefit. I mean, they will not do it because of sensitivity or because of environmental perspective and whatever. They have to see a benefit, and this is very human, by the way, and otherwise they will not be persuaded to do that. So that's the first finding, but I think that after that, it was quite useful, the outcomes. Countries and ministries, they started to implement actions, not the same always, because it is an homogeneous macro region, but there are tremendous differences in between them, mentality differences, cultural differences, economic not so much. And I think that we are on a good way. I will not be extremely optimistic, but I'm happy to say that we have seen some improvement since then. Yeah.
Thanks a lot, George. And I think Manfred could give us, I think, a very knowledgeable point of view from the cluster perspective, because of your long experience with a couple of them, to understand the role of the cluster as mentioned by Christophe, and how this can contribute to create the right condition at local scale.
Yeah, thank you for introducing me. Now there have been so many relevant statements being made. I hope to add some significant content. Some years ago, I coordinated the concept building for the bioeconomy in a metropolitan region. In this case, by the example of Frankfurt Rhein-Main, as we call it. You may all, or nearly all, know the airport of Frankfurt. The city of Frankfurt has only 800,000 people, so it's not so big. But in the surroundings are living 5.7 million people. And there is a significant share of the German chemical industry, which is number 3 in the world. So there is an economic power. And this preparation, this concept was for a call by the German Ministry of Research and Development, WIBON, up to 20 million euro funding. And if you add the private means which have to be gathered through this project, we will end up in 30, 40 million to be invested within 5 years, invested in R&D. Now, what is the basis of this concept? We understand the region as a marketplace. This is very important. It's a marketplace. It's not just a region. It's a marketplace for feedstock, for technologies we have to develop, for products, and also for financial capacities. Christoph, you are right that finance comes at the end, but there must be the capacity to raise this. And this brings me to the point yet that you need a balance of SME. Only SME is difficult. There must be a balance of big companies being able to raise money or invest private money. They are the locomotives, the pulling factor of such a cluster. And this makes it a real marketplace, because such a cluster becomes attractive for SME also and scientists and other stakeholders from outside, because there is a critical mass of money which is seeking technologies, seeking opportunities to invest. I give you 3 examples about the projects we are doing there. We are focusing not on primary biomass, but we are focusing on the waste materials in a metropolitan region. I told you 5.7 million people. There's a lot of municipal waste. So we have sludges, We have CO2 from biogas, if I look only on the biogenic CO2. From the cities, we have green cuttings. We have food waste. We have wastes from water treatment. And from these feedstock, we produce specialty chemicals, functional chemicals, I will give you an example, but also basic chemicals like methanol or kerosene. One of the big industrial players in this region is Infraserv. This might be not well known. This is the company running the big industrial chemical site in Frankfurt Höchst. And just with running this site concerning energies and infrastructure, they make a turnover of 1 billion euros. So you might have an idea about the size of this structure. And on this site is running Ineratec. This is a company producing kerosene from CO2 at pilot scale at the moment. So we heard about sustainable air shipping this morning. They are doing that from CO2. Other projects produce CO2 from methanol from CO2. So this is, I think we should be aware that we need big volumes in the bioeconomy to have a real impact on climate protection. Changing the fossil feedstock base to a bio-based feedstock base for a product of a few thousand tons, this doesn't make a real impact. But changing it to a product of 1 million tons, this makes an impact. So this is CO2 valorization. Another project which I really like is to use specific fatty acids in the insulation materials for buildings to produce a functional insulation material. And these fatty acids are from grease from water management. So this is an idea from the city of Darmstadt. They gave the idea, we have this grease, we have these fatty acids in it, let's use it to use a functional improved insulation material. And the other project is transformation of food waste and to feed insects with it and to produce from these insects a feed additive. And this is a functional feed additive because these insects produce antimicrobial peptides. And these antimicrobial peptides have their antimicrobial peptide activity then also in the feed. And now it goes a step further. We use the genetic information for these antimicrobial peptides from the soldier flea to transform bacteria and to express these peptides in bacteria. And now these are transformed or are tested as a food additive even. And this gives you an increase in value. How do we select these projects? This is another very crucial success factor for regional development and for cluster development. We have quantitative KPI. Quantitative. We have a quantitative KPI for CO2 reduction in a development project and for the minimum profit 3 years after market entrance. We had a lot of discussions with the universities who explained us why this is not possible in a research project. And it's difficult, sure. But we have that in our criteria, and the reason is that the project owners at least must explain us that it's plausible that they can reach these goals, the economical and the ecological. Often this is neglected in projects. Profit we may speak about later. No, in the planning phase, and then you select the real serious projects. Thank you.
Thank you, Manfred. I think that you were touching upon aspects dealing with the symbiosis between industries, between industry and agriculture, which was also touched upon by Novamont in his earlier presentation, and also the role of the urban and local environment. I wanted Filippo to elaborate on this because I understood yesterday during the dinner that you have a long experience with biorefineries and also creating the link between the European level and the local level. So if you have maybe some thoughts about these aspects.
Yes, thank you. So it's Filippo here. I'm representing the Bioeconomy Foundation of Ireland and the Bioeconomy Ventures Service we are coordinating. We are a cluster, similarly to Christophe's Bioeconomy for Change. We're 20 times smaller, as is the country as well. Ireland is a 5 million people country. So before I move to answer to your questions, I will also mention that from many perspectives, the full country of Ireland, or even better, the full island of Ireland, which includes 2 countries, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, is in fact a region. Because 5 million people, very connected value chains, we consider ourselves, compared to other countries, a single region. So as such, our national level can really play an important role on taxation and grants and connections and strategies. When it comes to the link to Europe, it's pretty much one of our core jobs as a foundation. We really, similarly to Bioeconomy for Change, we really look in the countryside, on the rural areas, in the coastal regions, and Ireland is full of inventors. People there inventing machines or applying machines. They just make things work, and they're applicable to conversion of biomass, but they have no idea about the open innovation, about the European jargon, the European ecosystem. So we pretty much spend time connecting them to the European ecosystem to find partners and to find subsidies as well. So that is pretty much what we see that has a lot of potential. But you need to be able to translate between the hands-on entrepreneurs and the open innovation, more sophisticated environment of the national and even more European level. If I can continue on this line, I would also elaborate that we believe that in Ireland you really see the impact of the regional level on the development of the bioeconomy. The country has its policy statement, its implementation group, and also a forum which is there to involve citizens. Then if you move down from national level, we have sort of regions, but they don't make laws. They are only association of county councils, okay? They have their own enterprise development strategy, which is important to keep in mind, because anybody who any of these inventors who wish to make a biorefinery, or a raffinery, or a factory, they will need to apply for a planning permission at local level. And very interestingly, you have to indicate how your proposed plan is coherent with the county level development strategy and the regional development strategy. You have to. And for example, the Midwest region and the Tipperary County Council, they both have bioeconomy there written in a lot of pages. So every single company who wants to upgrade biomass, process biomass, they would have to refer to bioeconomy. So these are people that have to refer to bioeconomy, and then they have to know what bioeconomy is. So that I believe it's maybe not a media campaign that talks about bioeconomy as a spot, but actually industrial people have to go through it, otherwise they will not get approval. So I believe that's a good example of how the bioeconomy concepts then, going back from the European level, how they are percolating at national level, but then at local level and at citizen level, not only by dissemination and communication, by the very functioning of the planning permission, of the industrial development, the regional plans and the national plans. So that could be a way to connect the different topics treated by George, Christophe and the other speakers as well.
Thanks a lot, Filippo. I think that we promised to be sharp because this is the last session, then we have a couple of speakers more, so 10 minutes, and I would like maybe to open to the floor the possibility to raise some points, questions. I don't know whether there is any input from the floor to the discussion we are having so far. Please.
Just a small question. We have a microphone.
You speak very loud, but it's better to have the mic.
Vander Tumiatis, Marconi. Just I have a small question for you. Sorry. I was very, very happy that in hydrogen valley or hydrogen opportunity is one of the highest priority, I understood, for the Apulia region, especially focus are in direction to steel production. But I know very well that I worked for many years, for in this time was Italsider. But the point is, the biggest unit in Europe or worldwide, the capacity, normal capacity is 10 million tons a year capacity, originally. And how many tons of hydrogen do you think in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years you are able to produce in Apulia? Secondly, if the green hydrogen is based with electrolysis, we have a thermodynamic limitation. For each 1 kilo of hydrogen to produce from electrolysis needs 55, 57 kilowatt hour. What is the source of this? Is it photovoltaic or other type of generation? I think it's very. I think it's the biggest challenge worldwide. It's the first. I am so surprised. What is your formula? Yours, obviously, for the Italian strategy in this direction? This is a question. Thank you.
Is there any other question? Otherwise, I would leave Mrs. Berlingerio to reply and then... Okay. Please.
Thanks. And I think it was a very interesting discussion, and I always observed in all the presentations a kind of symbiosis approach. You mentioned it, Stefano, and I think this is really becoming a challenge. The bioeconomy is not just, how to say, an agriculture-dependent or only agriculture-dependent business activity. Is becoming completely integrated, and even in regions where there is really a very large amount of biomass production and agriculture, like north of France, you even see there that there is a kind of integration. I think it was nice also what Manfred showed. You have an urban situation, and then you have biomass per definition in a certain way. So I would like to ask to the panel how you see the future of this kind of what I call industrial urban or industrial or urban agriculture kinds of symbiosis. And I think this really can contribute to what we call circularity and also to greenhouse gas reduction. If there are any thoughts about that in order to proceed with that for the future. I ask that because in Processes for Planet in Brussels we speak a lot of hubs for circularity, and this is combining industry with urban, and even we are discussing that combining industry, urban and agriculture. So any thoughts about that? Just open question.
Thanks, Ludo. There was another question, I think.
Thank you, Ludo. Samuele Ambrosetti from BIC, Bio-Based Industries Consortium. I just wanted to point out that while many people know us as the private side of the CBE, joint undertaking with the Commission, we're also working on other agenda points, one of which is stronger interaction with regions, in particular in terms of regional strategies and the attached regional development funds. And so I just wanted to extend the invitation to all the regions present to join our bioeconomy regions platform, Puglia first, because I think Puglia is not yet there, but we will love to have you. So just an open invitation to all the regions concerned.
Thanks, Samuele. Maybe we can start putting some answers to the table. I would start from Mrs. Berlingerio.
It is a very difficult question to answer. also because nowadays hydrogen, I'm sure I'm saying something that everybody knows, is not a technology of today. It's a technology of tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow. And so what they are doing is make an experiment on a small scale to see how it works and so on. But of course, if we want to produce green hydrogen, I was talking about only green hydrogen, because otherwise it would be maybe unuseful to swap to one technology to the other one. And also because green hydrogen is the only type of hydrogen whose production is financed by the European funds. REPowerEU talks about only green hydrogen. And there is a coincidence which is very curious, or at least we consider it like this. There are in Rome, to the Ministry of Ecological Transition, pending lots of applications for offshore aeolic platforms just in front of Puglia, which is, of course, let's say, it's an important sacrifice for our maritime landscape. But the same amount of gigawatt that are pending as application just in front of Puglia as offshore will be the need of Acciaierie d'Italia. So it is an historic and very curious coincidence, because we can see in a very easy way, I will say in a plastic way, we can see what we decide to sacrifice. Do we want to keep the production there with carbon coke and so on, or we want to swap to green hydrogen on any way to green power, renewable energies, but in this case, we need to have somewhere to produce it. So, of course, we are trying to negotiate with the national government that the offshore platform will be not very near to the coastline, but not before the 12 miles, which are the limit for territorial waters. But I think that there is not a technique, but a political decision, very important, lying below this process, which is where are we going to find the balance between the different needs that we have. So we'll see. C'è una replica. Prego. Sempre il microfono servirebbe, secondo. Sì.
First of all, in the Puglia region, the wind is not so high. To invest in offshore wind farm is not the best. We have experience because we are involved in in some projects in the biggest 500 megawatts in North Sea, etc. But I think that the wind in Apulia region is not so available until now. Secondly,
onshore we are
offshore.
But I want to say that onshore we are the region #1 in Italy for production from the wind.
But it's small.
Offshore, I'm sure it's not comparable to let's say, to North Sea or maybe the ocean.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, there are private, and I can recall Mr. Sacchellari's contribution, who said everybody has to have his economic benefit. I'm very I agree strongly
Yes.
with this sentence. So there are private organizations who are applying for offshore platform in the Adriatic Sea. So I think they checked out whether they can have benefits in that.
The second point was it is really a bug from the European Commission of our government, because you have alternative to grid. You have bio-hydrogen production, come from biomasses, is renewable, 100%. Much better, it will create much more value on your community because they are involved every day.
I was wondering maybe whether, because it's very interesting, but we don't want to monopolize the discussion, and I wanted also to give the possibility to answer to Ludo. I don't know which colleague from the floor can say something about the symbiosis.
I fully agree with your remark about openness and inclusiveness. Actually, fragmented approaches, they don't have chances. It has to be inclusive, and I said in my presentation first that the entire spectrum of stakeholders should be involved. And this we try to implement in projects we are developing or in proposals we are making, just including everybody inside. Otherwise, they will be holes. There will be empty spaces, and the real impact will not be fulfilled. And this is an absolute agreement for your remark. And I think that also the European Commission, if you look to the form of the proposals coming within Horizons Europe, they are on this concept. I mean, compare those proposals with proposals of 10 years ago. They're completely different, and they are on these directions. I mean, you cannot separate specialities or domains of application. It has to be a whole, and this is very important, I think. Thank you.
Manfred, please.
Well, I would like to comment on the urban agricultural symbiosis, but also on hydrogen. We all know that what we produce and wastes in urban surroundings in the beginning was primary biomass. So recycling, it's about the circular bioeconomy. We want to recycle all the carbon we introduce into the cycle from the beginning with primary biomass, which ends up in different kinds of waste. I gave you some examples. And the carbon should be kept in a product cycle. It should not enter the atmosphere. And this is the symbiosis, which is clear. And there's one important point for organizing a cluster or a region into this direction. It needs to engage not only the citizens, but also the public administration, because often the waste management is in the hand, or at least in part, in the hand of the public administration. You have to convince them and make. And my experience is that public administration very often doesn't know about the options of valorizing waste materials. They have to be really educated and trained, and this needs time. Now, concerning hydrogen, we should be aware that the bioeconomy is about downscaling. To give you an example how I mean that, Germany has, I think, 12, 16 oil refineries. The biggest is close to Leverkusen at the Rhine River. It has a capacity per year in carbon, only in carbon, to process 2 times the sugar production of Brazil. One refinery, 2 halves of Brazilian sugar. This is tremendous. Biorefineries will never reach such a size. It's about downscaling, and this is also a big economical disadvantage and a hurdle to bring bioeconomy forward. But how do I bring that together with hydrogen? We speak in this session about decarbonizing the bioeconomy, I think. I think we should really not use this word, because it's not only wrong concerning chemical production or material production, it's in general wrong. Because when we say we want to go from carbon-based energies to renewable, to wind, photovoltaic, and so on, this is the one hand. On the other, what do we do in fermentation, in biotechnological processes? The bacteria produce their energy from the carbon source. And this is the CO2 they emit. Ethanol fermentation emits 100 nearly pure CO2 stream. Biogas is 40% CO2. This is CO2 emission from energy production, just from microbial energy production. This is not carbonized. This is very misleading also to politicians and to the public if we speak about decarbonization. And now to hydrogen. One of the visions I really love most is that we standardize waste to methane by biogas production. This is a kind of a standardization. This methane can be used as a fuel, but also as a raw material for chemical production. Now, is it optimal to have, and Germany has 9,000 biogas plants. It's the most in Europe. And I'm sure here also in Puglia, there's a lot of potential for biogas. Now, is it wise to produce a biomethane and at the same time 40% CO2? No. We can use hydrogen to methanize this CO2. And my vision is to combine every biogas plant with a photovoltaic or a windmill and to use this pure energy, this clean energy, to produce the hydrogen to methanize the CO2. Then we have 100% yield from the feedstock. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Manfred. I think that we have reached the end of the session, and I don't know whether there is still the last question. Okay. Ok. Avete un microfono?
No, l'aveva già fatta.
Samuele. Okay. So because I thought it was just a spot for the participation, but
yes.
Yeah, that's what I understood, because I know Samuele very well. But
Yes.
It's a former colleague.
Maybe one word, and Manfred is totally right on insisting on that. We have heard the word decarbonization too many times today. We must stop using this word. This is misleading. The only thing we must decarbonize is the sky, the atmosphere. We must recarbonize the soil and change the origin of the carbon in the economy. No carbon, no life. No bioeconomy, no economy. That's very important because this is misleading, counterproductive, and we are surprising why bioeconomy is not progressing. It's progressing, but if people knew the benefits of bioeconomy, we will be more successful. The only one to blame is us because we are using expression like this. First, and two. I do agree on what you say. I completely disagree on the example that you gave, Manfred, because this is a duplication of the former petrochemical thinking, and that you feed refinery with biomass, so with very robust process, and for that you must go back to alkane, defunctionalize feedstock to refunctionalize that. Biomass, it's not like petrol, oil. The original molecules are over-functionalized. And we must invent a new chemistry. It is defunctionalization chemistry. We say reduction chemistry for the chemist, and biotech is only that. Because if you just put biomass to fill the vapor cracker, for instance, what you do, you eliminate all the function you have in glucose in a high-value molecule, and all the energy. Remember that photosynthesis yield is 0.3%. It means you have destroyed 99% of the 0.7% of the original energy. Come to CO and then spend energy to reconstruct a molecule. Even a 5-year-old child will understand this is something wrong. Wrong is, we say, stupid. Because unless we have unlimited biomass in the world, unlimited energy, but I don't think it is this. So bioeconomy is to preserve the functionality brought by life. That's, yes, the only precision I wanted to add on the example you mentioned, even if I agree with most of what you said.
I think that we have a lot of food for thought for the next, maybe IFIB but maybe Filippo, just a second, and then we close the session.
Yes, I will be very, very brief, but really, it has been mentioned, small-scale solutions, rural solutions, involvement of citizens. I just wanted to briefly say that as of next Monday, and until the end of 2025, we are going to run we're going to be involved in a new service that is about finding 1,000 new small-scale bio-based innovations in rural areas. So we're going to be involved all around Europe. I'm not going to say the name of it because we're not coordinating it. It will be announced next Monday. But we pretty much look forward to meet small-scale inventors in bio-based solutions, maybe also, as Christophe said, able to keep the functionalization of biomass and valorize it as such. And we pretty much look forward to connect those with our ongoing service of bioeconomy ventures, which is about matching inventors with investors. So I just wanted to mention that so that if anybody has bio-based solutions, everything we do, we are a non-for-profit and we're mostly funded by, gratefully funded by funding bodies. So if you have those solutions or you know people who have them, just chat with me. I will be happy to take it from there.
Thanks a lot. So I think that is very good closure with a good perspective. So I thank very much my panelists, and I will hand it over to Mario, I guess, for the last two presentations, unless I'm not expected to do that. But I can go on. Then my colleague Fabio then can speak about the Frontship project, right? It's about circular cities and regions. So it's a good continuation of the. Yeah, you can go. Sorry for that. I'm trying to manage the rest of the day. Grazie mille.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone. Nice to meet you all, and it's a pleasure to be here. So my name is Fabio Magrassi. I'm a project manager at STAM, and I will try to not bore you speaking about this project called Frontship. But first of all, just a brief introduction regarding the company that I represent. It's an engineering company and innovation consulting SME from Genoa, Italy. We have a wide network with more than 800 partnerships and spin-off in Italy and Greece. We are mainly all engineers, and as I said, we are working a lot in R&D through our multidisciplinary expertise. Let's say that the company is subdivided in four areas of expertise, and let's say that one of the horizontal thematics that each area encounter is the one of sustainability solution that, let's say, I'm representing here. So to give you an overview of some of the projects that we lead, I will present the project Frontship that is a Green Deal project. So we have heard a lot about the Green Deal projects today. So I'm going to present one of the awarded Green Deal project under the Circular Cities and Region initiatives. The project started roughly 1 year ago, and let's say that is going to run for the next for 4 years. So there's 3 years left. We are in our first year of initiatives, so some bright and small results are coming off. We are 34 different partners from all over Europe. You had the possibility today to hear from Novamont, that is one of the partners, STAM is another partner, and of course there's a lot of different regions involved. And the idea behind the project is of course to try to find a way to bring circularity as a systemic solution inside the region. So giving the award, I can explain to you the project in this way that is quite complex. Instead, I'm going to tell you a fairy tale. So, once upon a time, there was a land called Uch. Uch is more than a land, a region, that means ship. And this is already peculiar, because this region that is named ship is situated in the center of Poland, without any sea. So this is the first peculiar part. You can imagine that after having lived many years in harmony with the nature, in this region, the inhabitants of the island face a century of great invention and innovation that leave the island and the kingdom in a situation of great suffering for the environment. Society was under pressure, the economy was collapsing, and the environment was exploited to the last drop. Wood was used and wasted, water was polluted, plastic was produced and not recycled. Food waste, at the end, was not used, and marginal lands were in environmental degradation. So the people of this region decide to summon 34 different sages from all over the nation to try to solve the problem. The sages were divided in 4 different circular systemic groups, and they decided to find a solution through solving the problem in 3 different levels. So technical level, policy level, and social level. They also described these 3 different levels, such as hell, purgatory, and heaven. So this reminded to the citizen an historical adventurer from Italy, from Florence at the end, that had a lot of experience traveling through hell, heaven, and purgatory. So they summoned this person that, to fulfill his journey, required a map that it was called Road to Circularity. So the citizens worked together to define the best possible roadmap to give to the explorer, and they built this Road to Circularity. So after that, they send the explorer to find solution throughout this map. So he started his journey, and he encountered the gate of hell, that as an Italian is probably a pineapple pizza, of course. So in the hell, he met all the engineers, so their hard sciences, and they give him the pillar of a technical solution that were to be found in net zero energy recovery, so a lot of technology to avoid or diminish impacts, a lot of system to purify, for example, water and to recover nutrients. So these strong technical pillars to build upon. So with this pillar, he moved to purgatory, where he met politicians. And in here, he started working with them to build the policy pillar through value chain valorization, novel regulation, and of course, voluntary trade of CO2 reduction. Then he moved to heaven, the last part, where he encountered all the citizens. And in there, they built together the society pillar. So they started to find solutions to involve citizens in energy just transition, circular product, and also reskilling of workers for good practices. So after having traveling that much, he come back to the region with all these 3 technical pillars, and he give the pillars to the citizen of the region to build upon the best possible circular economic solution and temple. So it was just to, let's say, paraphrase what we are going to build in the next 3 years. So we are going to work in 4 different systemic solutions. Each one of them work in a different area, but all the 4 of them are built upon the sustainability. And sustainability, of course, means to work on the technical level, to work on the economical and social level, and to work on the policy level. So we are going to do that and try to find the solution in all the level for 4 different resources that are wood, water, there's going to be the food involved, and the last one is going to be the polymers. So let's say that we started this road, as I told you, 1 year ago, And if we want to keep track of that, also in the verge of the bio-circular economy innovation that we are going to test in the region throughout food, please visit our website and join, let's say, the change. Because, of course, these innovations are going to be replicated also in Italy, in Campania region. So, thank you very much for everything, and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Fabio. I remember pretty well a year ago or a few months earlier when we were putting all this project together. And the funny thing was that the call was about circular cities and region, but the project and the proposal was mobilized by an Italian company that, working closely with the region and the local municipality, was able to actually to get awarded 4 out of 96 proposals. I think that the next speaker is going to present to us another successful case study. It's the Biomodel for Regions project, which will be presented by Roberto Russo from Ciautec.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. So thank you for being here. I'm very happy to be invited and to also be the last speaker today. So probably the main obstacle toward the networking cocktail. So we'll try to be smart and to lead you there, talking about this nice, very nice project that is Biomodel for Regions. But before going there, I would like to speak a bit about myself, so to introduce me, and about the company I work for. So about myself, my name is Roberto Russo. I'm a senior manager consultant in Ciautec of Group P&O. My background is in physics, and let's say my leitmotif for working is that I really love innovation. I spent the last 12 years in P&O working in basically any kinds of fields to do innovations, so from energy to bio-based economy to even, let's say, space or philosophy. Even there is some research that needs to be done. And across this year, I look upon many nice projects, especially in bioeconomy, like the one I worked for that was Data Bio, before this one that I will present you. Regarding P&O, the company is a consultancy company that works to support innovation, and it was founded in the middle of the 80s in the Netherlands from a few people that were there and were looking forwards, hoping to support innovation, to bring new products in the world and to have this feeling to make a change in the world for the better. Of course, also to gain some profit out of it. After almost 40 years, I must say that this was a successful idea. Right now, the P&O is present in more than 9 countries across Europe. We have a lot of partners, a huge network of stakeholders that we collected among all this year that we are really happy to work with to bring innovation into the world. And every year we participate and we help our clients, our stakeholders to submit even more than 6,000 projects, considering European and national and local level, with an amount of budgets that we collect around 1 billion for all of them to push on this innovation across Europe. In P&O, we are right now around 500 consultants, most of them has a technical background because we want to enter into the innovation to discuss with our clients. But we also have, of course, financial background specialists, also fiscal specialists, because we need to cover all the aspects in the supporting of the innovation. And across this year, we also developed a lot of services to support this innovation process that is not just at the beginning only supporting the funding, that at that time in the 80s was the main, say, leitmotif, but right now is also helping intelligence activities, but creating connection, networking with the right partners, motivates and develop projects. And of course, get funding, that's always, but also participating in projects, like in this one that I will present, to make a real difference in, as first actor. So let's go to the projects. Biomodel for Regions is a European funded project that has the scope to support, let's say, the decision makings at the local and regional level in terms of implementing bio-based economy. So how we want to do this? first of all, by involving a lot of partners. Here you can find the partnership of the projects. Also, you can recognize some of, let's say, companies, Spring for All, that is hosting all. But of course, apart from this partnership, we also have a lot of other external stakeholders that will participate, even if not official partners, to the project and activities and the pilots that will be done during the project. The main objective of the project, of course, is to support this establishment of innovative governance models, but at the local and regional level, because the scope of the project is to start from the local ecosystem to find specific, let's say, needs, specific capacity of each different ecosystem that we have across Europe, and find models and strategies to support them all in enabling, let's say, innovation and enabling bio-based economy. And first of all, of course, we want to try to define some kind of blueprint in this kind of strategy. So that's depending on the ecosystem, the situation where we are, let's say, applying these models, we can eventually define how this can be replicated and reported also in other situations similar. Another point, of course, is also to developing novel business models, because in order to make any kinds of strategy sustainable at local level or European level, you also need to have an effective business model, because even the business is what is, say, pushing forward these kinds of innovations and these kinds of developments. And also it is important for us to show to the public, from the consumers to the industry to the policymakers, that it's possible to have a responsible environmental behavior, at the same time have a good business and make a lot of profit out of it. Finally, of course, we want to implement all these concepts into 6 pilots that will be developed in different regions in Europe in order to extract some best practice that then can be replicated in a similar context. We will, of course, in order to define these best practices, we will also leverage on all the other projects already, say, developed and concluded by the project partners and across Europe, so that we can really bring, let's say, a comprehensive solutions to the future user of our results. Which are the model regions? As you can see, we are distributed basically across Europe. So we go from the western to the southern, eastern, northern, and central Europe, so that we can, let's say, have a look at different situations, different, let's say, conditions and needs, and also environments that we can find as ecosystem. So we have a region in Normandy that will be especially, in this case of the project, focused on shellfish. There is a lot of, let's say, strict and precise policy and regulations about the shellfish, let's say, business and economy, but there is still a lack of policy and clarity about what to do with the co-product and the byproduct of this huge business for France. So in this case, in this pilot, the focus will be on how to support, let's say, the region to develop a new policy to valorize this byproduct that is huge and is there, and so far is not completely, let's say, exploited as it could be. For the Delta region in the southwestern Netherlands, instead, we will focus on the, let's say, more circular economy concepts related to crops production. They have a lot of crops production there too, and they would like to valorize the waste and, let's say, residual streams that are produced during this process. So the focus there will be mostly on this, on finding new models to exploit this waste that is there produced, and define a better circular way to exploit these assets in the region. For the Western Macedonia, here there is a completely different situation, because there is a complete lack of policy, or even logistics infrastructure in order to manage the waste that they are producing. So here the challenge will be to support them to, let's say, structurize a bit their process, their internal value chain, how they could collaborate, how they could build a good ecosystem, even in terms eventually of cluster and association that can support this starting up, let's say, of the process. Tuscany and whole Italy, here, of course, we have a different situation. There is a lot of good practices already, waste management. We are already doing a lot. And anyway, the focus here would be to try to bring these goods and a well-established value chain and economy to a next level. So to something that can really valorize each kind of waste or byproducts that is produced in the management of the waste in this specific region. Slovakia, here we are talking again about waste management, and for them they are already establishing a network of, let's say, governance that will manage the management of food waste, principle in main point. But they are interested, I mean, it is the first time that they're doing something like that. So far, they were not yet managing any kinds of food apart, using it for, let's say, producing or using composting facility. But they want to expand this because from now on, they will have to collect all this food waste and the bio waste by law, so they have to, let's say, build up again an whole infrastructure, all, let's say, regulations to go on. And this is also part of what we will help them to do. And in Sweden, instead, of course, the pilots will be focused on the forestry. They have a lot of forestry there. There is a huge business about forestry, and also in their case, there is a lot of byproducts and waste that they produce in their current processes, and they would like to improve, let's say, this exploitation of this biomass, also supporting maybe the implementation of new regulation, new policy that can help them into better manage these kinds of challenges for them. So in the end, the idea of the project is, of course, to deliver all of these and have potential impact in mainly supporting the local community to establish, let's say, their strategies to approach these kinds of activities, improve and involve all the actors in the process so that also in terms of value chain and stakeholders, they can all be parts of the activities and help them to define these best practices and blueprints that then can be replicated across Europe. So far, I cannot bring much, let's say, results because the project just started last July. So we are actually at the beginning, but I'm sure that we can bring a lot of results, and I will invite everyone, if you are interested, to reach out, because maybe we can also try to establish together potential replication already during the project, if you are interested in that. Thanks a lot.
So thank you, Roberto. Thank you for the last speech of this day. We are proud of being partner of Biomodel for Regions. At Spring, we are working with Tuscany. And so last June, our General Assembly took place in Florence, and I can anticipate that the next edition of IFIB will take place in Florence next year. So thank you very much for joining us today. We will meet tomorrow with another session, another 2 sessions, roundtables and a discussion about bioeconomy, the roundtable on investments, and so other speeches also. As Torsten anticipated in his keynote speech, the session focused on sustainable aviation fuels. So it has been a very fruitful day, and thanks again. Now we can relax in front of a glass of wine, sparkling wine or whatever. And so you know, for speakers and our partners, this is this chance to spend other time together, and we will meet here, and we could come together. We can go together to the venue of our networking cocktail. So thanks, and see you tomorrow. Have a nice evening.